doing all these good things.
I think the cameras are not on.
Yeah, they are.
Good evening, Rolling Meadows. This is the November 21st, 2017 meeting of the whole, and it is 7:30 p.m. I'd like to welcome you all here. Mr. Krumstock, who is going to lead off tonight?
It's going to be a quick introduction by Public Works Director Fred Rote, and then it's going to turn it over to RGN Group Representative Kathy Morley, who actually is here numerous times with some of our sanitary items that we do. So with that, I turn it over to Fred, and then Kathy will be up here.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Mayor. For over 30 years, we have been working with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District to continually seek to be in compliance with regards to their efforts to reduce what we call inflow and infiltration, or another way to put it is stormwater into the sanitary sewer system that doesn't belong there. There was a considerable effort made in the 80s, 1990s, that kind of waned in the early part of this century, but is back in large part because the federal EPA is requiring the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, as well as many other similar districts in metropolitan areas throughout the country, to step up their efforts to reduce the cost of treating stormwater. And we are one of hundreds of communities within the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, and need to be in compliance. Back in the 80s, I won't spend too much time with that, but we had a program that tried to focus on cost-effective means by which to get stormwater out of the system, and the city participated with that, but it only went so far. This program that really started in about 2012 to 2014 in terms of its planning had several municipalities, including Rolling Meadows, involved with putting the program together. I personally sat in many meetings and sub-meetings to try to put some rationale to this in terms of the approach, and one of the things that the municipalities and outside agencies caused the district to take on is what they call their high priority area, where we see either large sanitary sewers or a large number of sanitary sewers that are near the creeks, crossing the creeks, things that historically speaking are more at risk in Rolling Meadows, for example, than areas out remote from the creek, and areas that are newer to the city, areas that were built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, to try to avoid that. So Kathy Morley will go through that in terms of what we defined as our high priority area, which is primarily by Salt Creek, either side of it, as well as an area of Waverly Park south of Central, and then a small area out west where we have a sanitary sewer paralleling a different branch of Salt Creek. There's a number of things that I'll highlight after Kathy's done with her presentation, just in terms of where we go from here. But one of the things that we were charged with doing during the first 5 years of this new program in our high priority areas to smoke test the sewers to see where we can find simple, obvious areas where stormwater can infiltrate into the sanitary sewer system. So some of them are in the public sector, many of them are in the private sector, many of them are simple fixes like clean out caps that are leaking. And I'll turn over to Kathy here and let her talk about the specific approach we did and what the findings were, and then I'll come back after she's done. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stand to one side because it's easier for me then. I'm going to go through this, and feel free to jump in. I'm obviously take questions at the end, but if I talk about something that you have no idea what I'm talking about, then stop me and I'll digress. So I say we're talking about smoke testing results, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole overall MWRD program, because I think that we need to put it in context. So as Fred said, it's an I&I reduction program. The initial phase is 5 years, so it runs through 2019, and they wanted each municipality to undertake condition assessment of a high priority area, and then to rehabilitate the high priority defects that were cost effective. We can discuss that in a bit. And then to develop a long-term operation and maintenance plan, that has to be submitted in 2019, and to develop a private sector program, and that supposedly has to be submitted in 2019. I say supposedly because no one at MWRD has any idea what's going to be in the private sector program yet. So that, I think, is a matter for discussion. So the high priority area had to be an area that was at least 10% of the city sewers. For every community, really, it was sort of pretty, some didn't know which were going to be their worst areas, so they had to undertake flow monitoring. For Rolling Meadows, it was pretty obvious because they've done a lot of work already. And so their area is here, which is the area around, with Salt Creek, and then there's Waverly Park at the bottom. And then HP2, you really can't see it very well. But is that Meacham? Old Plum Grove Road. Okay. So there's, it's a sewer that literally runs parallel to the other bit of Salt Creek. You have an awful lot of bits of Salt Creek in the city, unfortunately, and lots of crossings. So there's sewers crossing there. So that was the two areas. And actually, it does say up there what percentage is. It's actually about 13% with many communities. I mean, they didn't want you to go to exactly 10%. They wanted you to be sort of, honest and say, okay, which is your worst area? Is that about 10, 12, 14? It doesn't matter, but they just didn't want you to just ignore this completely. So that was done. And then they had to televise all of the sewers in something called PACP coding, which is a NASCO. That's a sewer service, the National Sewer Service companies. There's a standard coding system, and it either had to be coded that way or reviewed and then coded. You have an awesome TV guys here, which Dan already knows, and I have to say a shout out to the City of Rolling Meadows from someone that has been struggling the last 2 days with two other municipalities and how awful their TV is. What I get from this city is just like it's wonderful. So a shout out to you guys because it really is good. So all of that was complete. They had scored it themselves in house, and then we. I'm what's called PSCP certified. That's that coding system. So then I just went in and prioritized it based on coding. That's done. And you have to undertake the rehabilitation over the next 5 years. Basically, everything that we've identified as major will be finished next year. The bulk of it will be finished this year with just a few stragglers next year. Had to smoke test all the sewers in the HP area. That was completed this year. That's just a very quick picture. We identified 343 defects, 133 public sector, 210 private sector. That is not unusual these days. We smoke tested a lot of areas back in the 1980s under the ICAP program when the whole area was under consent order, not just Rolling Meadows, the whole of what was then MWRDGC. And all the low-hanging fruit, like downspouts, were all disconnected then. And direct connects of storm sewers and things. So all the easy stuff's been done. And the city maintains their sewers, so really it's mainly private sector these days. And in to the west area, we just only identified 6 defects, and they were manhole seals. There were no private sector defects on that side. So if you can read this, this is what's going to be in the report coming at the end of the year. And this shows the public defects are identified and the private defects. Don't worry too much about the flow numbers. We have a way of assigning numbers. These obviously aren't actual numbers. This is for, analytical purposes in terms of, a driveway drain is going to contribute way more flow than a cracked clean-out cap, for example. It's just to give an order of magnitude for these. So sanitary mainline. One smoking sanitary main line was identified under MWRD that has to be lined. That's already been done by your awesome Public Works Department. So that was, as soon as it was identified, it was done. Storm manholes and storm inlets. These are almost certainly indirect cross connections. This is where the storm sewers are crossing a sanitary sewer or a lateral, and one is leaking into the other, what we call an indirect connection. It would be very unusual to find a direct connection these days, but not unheard of. This is what a storm defect looks like. This is just 2 different streets. These are storm manholes, you can see. Interesting enough, you had 19 defects, and 14 of them were on Martin Lane. And you only have to test the highs and mediums for MWRD, and they are all on Martin Lane. So none of them anywhere else. You will see that there's one that was a high smoking defect in the middle. Is that the playing field, Dan?
Yeah.
In the middle of the playing field. So we are wondering what that is. But we think it's probably maybe crossing the lateral from the school. We don't know. Or crossing that piece of sewer that hasn't been lined from the school. So the next thing up that has to be done is that we have to dye flood all the segments with smoking catch basins or inlets, and that has to be done in 2018, within a year of doing smoke. So that's on the agenda for this coming year, and as I said, it will only be the highs and mediums that we report, because the light ones really, it's just a wisp. It's too expensive to try and find out where that's coming from. So you have to identify the defects and then rehabilitate if they're in the public sector. And I will tell you now that the chances that they're in the public sector are slim to none, unless they're coming into manholes, because almost all the sewers have been lined in that area. And what we find is the vast majority of the stormwater flow is coming into laterals. So what is dye flooding? It simulates an extreme storm event, and it pinpoints sources of flow, cross-connections between the storm and sanitary. And what you can see here, this is from another town, but it's done in conjunction with TV of the sanitary sewer, and you can see green dye coming in to the sanitary sewer at a joint in the sewer. This is an unlined sewer here, that picture. And so essentially what you do is you plug the storm sewer, you fill it with water, and you keep filling it until it's at sort of a static point. And if you keep filling it, then you add dye to it, so you know it's coloured, and then you run your camera in the sanitary sewer underneath and start looking for leaks. And that's what we call this is technically an indirect cross connection. A direct cross connection would be where the storm sewer is connected directly to the sanitary, but these days that's unusual to find that. So, got all the way through that, and the next thing to do is to replace broken or missing clean-out caps. That is a requirement under the MWRD program and has to be done within a year. So, there were 99 identified, but not all of them are going to be simple, because some of them actually have the tops broken, the threads are gone. But I know that the city is planning to go through and probably address a lot of these in-house rather than sending letters to homeowners. We can discuss the pros and cons of doing that, but having worked on a program like this with a number of other communities, we all came down to the conclusion that it was easier just to have the city replace it rather than start sending letters and following up and having people calling me and said they cleaned their cap, and you end up with a $400 clean-out cap rather than $8 or $10 once you've added in all the time. This is what they look like. So the one on the left, I chose pictures where you couldn't tell the house. So the one on the left is the cap's completely gone. Can you see, like, there's just, the vertical column there. The one on the right is really common. This is where the lawnmower has just gone over that sort of square nut, the square bit that sits in the top that stands proud. And, either you've gone over it or the lawn guys have gone over it. Depends on the community, whether it's the lawn guys or yourself, But obviously you can get flow in, and it's really easy to repair in that situation because it's just swapping out the cap at that point. So, the next thing that has to be done is to inspect all the manholes in the HB area, and the city plans to do that in 2018. Again, everything that we're talking about has to be completed by 2019, so we're trying to keep moving on this. And then again, rehabilitate high priority defects. That rehabilitation doesn't have to take place in 2019, except for things like if they discover pig hole covers, and there's a few things that have to be replaced within a year, but everything else you have a bit more of a time frame to do it. So we had one pig hole cover, which I suspect Dan will probably take care of pretty soon. Right. And then 111 other manholes that smoked. However, the manholes that smoked, so we're looking at adjustment seals here. The information that we get from doing manhole inspections will supersede this. So, this is just an indication, because many times you'll smoke and a municipality won't do manhole inspections. Under the MWRD program, they have to. But if you're not within Cook County, you might go and smoke and not do manhole inspections. So then you need to know that your manhole seals aren't in good shape. But the data that you're going to get from manhole inspections is so much better. But the pig hole is a pig hole, and that smokes, and that can be replaced. So this is what your manhole defects look like. There's a small one on the left, a large one in the middle, and then on the right is a private one, which I think we were discussing is one of the old cisterns probably, right? So there's not much you can do about that because that is directly connected. So they could maybe adjust this, tighten up their seal, get that corked or something. But obviously, Exhibit B in the middle needs to be looked at. So we're going to manhole scan next year, and instead of doing what we usually do, which is you stand at the top, or if it's very deep, you dive it. When you get to about 13, 14 feet, you really can't see the bottom of the manhole, and you've got to dive it at that point. And obviously we do that on a regular basis, but it's A, time consuming, and B, dangerous. So we try and do things from the surface, but as I say, when you get to about 13, 14 feet, you cannot see the bottom of the manhole and what's going on. And you've got sewers on Central Road that I know are close to 20 feet, right? Yeah. So, and you've got some others. J Lane is almost all 17, 18, 19 feet. So none of these are easy to inspect. They all need to be dived. So there are different manhole scanners on the market now. Some of them go off the back of a truck, and some of them are actually portable. And this one, the Clever Scan, is actually portable. When it says it's portable, I can lift and carry this. It weighs 32 pounds. So I can lift and carry this on my own, although it's designed to actually, for two people to carry it. And you can see the way it's designed. You don't have to have a tripod over the manhole. That bottom ring literally sits on the ring of the manhole frame. Okay. Oops, sorry, let me go back one. No, I'm going to go back one again because I want to show you the video. Hang on. Okay, let's see if it works this time. Here we go. So this is a different product, but they all essentially provide the same. You can see it's going down, and it's also giving you at the bottom, it's giving you an opened out version of the whole thing. At the top, you're getting a point cloud. You can do measurements, and yes, the cockroaches come free on this. So I'm almost certain this is a Texas video, but actually maybe not, because the roaches are usually a bit bigger in Texas. But pardon? Everything's bigger in Texas, yeah. So with the point cloud, you can actually measure the diameter of the pipe. So if you're not sure, if you think it's an 8, but it might actually be a 10 or something. Again, your city's got fantastic records, but not all do. So that's the sort of thing that you're going to get by having a scanner. You're going to have a permanent record. You can literally open it out, have a look at it, see what the condition is. And the nice thing is that you can really see the adjustment area and the pipe seals. So that's the top and the bottom. And those are the two areas that are almost always the worst in manholes. So that's what you're going to get, something that looks like that. So conclusions. The city is absolutely on track with their MWRD program. Televised all sewers has been done. Undertake major lining, that's been done. There's some that will finish off the area this year, and then there'll be a few segments remaining next year. Smoke testing is complete. So that's everything you needed to do in those is done or on track. So next steps is to inspect all the manholes in the HP area. There will be 7 dye flood setups, which really isn't a lot, and they're all going to be on Martin. There may end up being 5. It just depends where we can put plugs and things, whether we can get it down to 5. But conservatively, we'll say 7. So you are actually very lucky. I know you doesn't think this, but we have communities where almost every single catch basin smoked, and they're looking at hundreds of dye flood setups per the MWRD program, and that is expensive, very expensive. So replace broken, missing cleanout caps. That's on the plan, and then continue with the sewer lining. I think 7 or 8 lines next year left. Those are high priority. Yeah, it's very, very few. The bulk will get down this year, and then the rest next year. So still way ahead of 19. And then development of the long-term O&M plan. Development will start next year, and then the following year, the year it's to be submitted, it will be fleshed out in more detail. But the overall plan will be developed next year. And again, you've been undertaking a 5-year sanitary O&M plan for the last, since 2005. Yeah, so that's not going to be as much work as other communities who've never looked at this at all. So, any questions?
Anyone on the council have any questions for? I think you've answered it all. Thank you, Fred. Any follow-up?
Yes, if I could, Mayor, just briefly. When Kathy gives credit to our Public Works Department, I appreciate that. But it really can't happen without support over the years of the mayor and council that I think since 1997 we've always been provided a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year on average to take care of our sanitary sewer system. And Dan Saveska, who's here, and his crew are a lot of the credit of that, not only with the equipment that we procure and get, but the use of that equipment. We are so far ahead of most communities. And one short story I'll just tell you, when I was serving on one of the committees, we kept pressing the district for the possibility of getting loan money for homeowners. That still hasn't happened, but we said, could you give us some parameters? What are we looking for in terms of an average community to spend based on its population, based on its miles of sewer? And what they ultimately came down to was around $250,000 to $400,000. And I said, well, perfect. We've been doing that for 15 years. We've been right. It's been spot on, and appreciate all the support that the mayors and the council have given us to be in this position where it's not a crisis in terms of looking at expenses in future years to try to get in compliance. We're right where we should be. There are some things that we'll want to talk about in the future. Might be several months out, but we do want to look at some of the private sector severe repairs, the driveway drain that Kathy referred to, a couple of the other sump pump connections that may be out there. We'll pursue those, but realizing that homeowners may be looking at $3,000, $5,000 or more to make those repairs, we don't want to just spring that on them. We want to work with them to try to get that corrected in the upcoming years. The clean-out caps that Kathy referred to, we really think that we're best to just do those, save a lot of mailing, save a lot of strife for homeowners. We certainly will send them a letter telling them that we're doing it or that we did do it, but we can do that in-house and keep the costs down. Lastly, we'll monitor what other communities in the area are doing with regards to the private sector approach as we put our program together in the next couple of years for the MWRD, so that we're not doing things that other communities aren't doing or doing more than we actually need to do. But we certainly want to do whatever we can where cost effective to get the stormwater out of the sanitary sewer system. So that's where this program is right now. And if anybody's got questions for me, I'll be happy to address them.
Mr. Cannon.
Thank you. Brad, I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe Barry can. We've been talking over the last few years that we might be behind on infrastructure when it comes to water and sewer. I know we've thrown around a number of $4 to $5 million. How does this program interact with that in the sense of how much we're behind?
You want to go first?
You can go first, but I'll follow up.
A lot of our sanitary sewer efforts, as the presentation makes and what we've done in the past is right where we're supposed to be, but we need to keep funding that. It's not going to go away. We don't know yet, a couple of years from now, what the district will require us to do or encourage us to do in terms of the private sector. And as Kathy said, there's a lot out there. The majority of the infiltration is probably from the private sector, so we need to be cognizant of that. Water mains are certainly something that we're looking at, and one can tell that just looking at the 5-year capital plan, that replacements of water mains that were built in the late 50s and the 60s, mostly cast iron pipes, are going to need to be replaced. We've started that program actually, back about 15 years ago in Waverly Park, and a lot of those mains have been replaced, but there's a lot more to do. There's also a goodly amount of storm sewer work to do, not because there's massive drainage problems, but storm sewers are also 60-some years old, and they start to fail, collapse. We've replaced, probably 2 lines per year the last couple of years, just because the concrete pipe has deteriorated or has failed us, and we've had to make repairs. So that's really where we're looking at infrastructure in terms of the utilities.
And the other thing is, obviously, when we talk about that $4 million, we've also taken out 2 Illinois state loans, $1.2 million each, roughly, to catch up on some of those other pieces. And as Dan and Fred know, even with some of the infrastructure, we opened up one area a few years ago now, and it was worse than we expected. It was by a bridge, so it became another little issue. So again, that infrastructure that we talk about, it's because we are aging community and we are actually finding more issues that we need to address. So doing the infrastructure now expedites that, and as the ad hoc capital improvement committee knows, we have a lot of capital improvements that are out there, but because we have a plan and because we stay in touch with, obviously RJN knows this, we keep on pushing the envelope as much as we can to stay above water, if you want to call it, if you want, at this point in time, where other communities have deferred so much that now it's a higher number for them. So that infrastructure that we do talk about, we do need to do. It would be beneficial for the community, so it's not something that we're saying, hey, it's really a need.
So to go along with that, as we move forward, the $4 million, I hear that number. Is that something you would like to see maybe possibly bonded out, or are we just going to attack this year by year?
So what we're planning right now, obviously we have the update in the utility study being done by Baxter Woodman. Sorry, Kathy, you just heard your competitor. But Baxter Woodman's finishing that update, so we will have their new number, what they see with the utility items. But then when we have that number, we will be back to the City Council potentially with that discussion. And that's actually what the Council has before us, that Finance Director Melissa Gallagher and I are working with our bond counsel with hypotheticals, and that's what we're also utilizing, the hypothetical for this item plus this item, and what numbers could we bring back to you guys where we feel comfortable, and then you would have to decide if you're comfortable with that, and then when we actually deal with the bond. But that is our idea, to hopefully give you 2 numbers.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Questions? Thank you, Fred.
Okay. Thank you.
It was enlightening. You gentlemen and young lady get to go home early, so enjoy.
I don't know if anyone's interested, but there is like a handout about the program. So if anyone, because you're probably with committee, might like to look at that. Some might be for the Thanksgiving weekend.
Thank you very much.
Studied over the weekend.
Mr. Comstock, we're moving right along here.
Obviously, the next item is our 2018 community events for the City of Rolling Meadows. Obviously, Assistant to the City Manager, Lori Czak, is going to run most of this discussion, but just to kick it off, obviously for the last few years, and thanks to the City Council and especially all the volunteers, Alderman Majikis has been fantastic, even working the bar at the Taste of the Town that's coming up in 2018. But we do appreciate everybody who's really been working on this for the last few years, and obviously through the City Council and some of our discussions, and obviously through residents, they want to see continued more in some of the other pieces. So the budget for community events has increased, and when we talk community events, obviously you have to throw Memorial Day and 4th of July in there too, but it also talks about Taste of the Town. It talks about the farmers and food trucks, that one of the recommendations that we're actually talking about for this year is calling it the city markets. You also talk about National Night Out. You talk about some of those Friday Rocks that we kicked off this year and some of those other pieces. So that budget has increased. So the foundation is obviously still soliciting money. We will take any kind of donations out there. Last year, up to this point in time, they fundraised about $38,000, and they expended about $32,000 of that to make sure that we were still within boundaries. So obviously the city, through the council, we're still the largest majority sponsoring these items. But at the same point in time, I think people should also recognize with a lot of work with the volunteers, we also have employees. And employees are beneficial, and they're the soul of every little thing. And every year it becomes a little bit easier for some of these things. But for employees, we actually do it for regular time. Sometimes we do it for flex time, and then there's some overtime that is consistent for these community events. But overall, I can tell you, and I think most of the council members have heard, residents really appreciate everything that the Community Events Foundation and all the volunteers have done. And with that, I'll leave it off to Assistant to the City Manager, Lori Cizek, to go over the 2018 schedule. And the final note that I would say is the last program that we have for 2017 is December 7th for the tree lighting and spaghetti dinner. So with that, all yours.
Thank you. So we would like to just suggest some events for 2018. And I think you were given a calendar in your packet, or maybe you have seen this. This is a proposed calendar of events for 2018. And we pretty much kept it similar to last year. We did lose the Wine and Cheese Affair, which happened in April, and we gave it 2 years, and I think some good fighting chances, and it just didn't really do what we wanted it to, so that one was dropped. But otherwise, you'll notice the schedule looks pretty similar to last year. And what we'd like to propose with farmers markets would be two major things. First of all, to consider changing the names to just city markets instead of farmers and food trucks, for the sole reason that it's tougher and tougher to get farmers multiple and food trucks multiple. And so I figured it would be probably a safe thing to just kind of be more generic and call the event city markets. So that's the first major point on the markets that I'd like to point out. The second would be we have been in discussion with the Community Church Board, and they have agreed to allow our markets to move there next year, with your blessing, of course. And the reason we'd like to do this is we believe that the street exposure and the pedestrian traffic will definitely be increased, which will definitely help the market through and through. They have also allowed us to display our city market signs there. And if you're familiar, they have that corner area at Kirchhoff and Meadow, and it's just calling for a big old city market sign. So they're very fine with doing that as long as it doesn't interfere with any of their advertising, such as for the Corn Fest. Market time would remain the same. And the only other little change would be, instead of being able to advertise the fourth Saturday of each month, May through September, we would have to make an exception in July, and it would be the third Saturday. Reason being is they are preparing for their Corn Fest on the fourth Saturday. You'll see the market dates, the May through September dates listed. And before I move on, any questions on the markets in general?
No, I just think it's been excellent from day one. I thank you and your staff, and having been part of the community events group. I know they're a fun group, and I did have the opportunity to meet with, there were I think, Laura, 24 that came together.
Definitely.
And those are the folks, I mean, Mr. Whitney's here, who does double duty with Crime Stoppers and community events. In regard to the farmers market, I'm going to blame Mr. Banger that he did not produce enough produce and vegetables this year. So that's the reason we. No,
There was plenty of honey.
There was plenty of honey, but there was not enough fruits and vegetables. But no, I just want to thank again everyone who's involved in that event. I know that 5 years ago when I came on the council, that was something that people kept talking about, is we're not doing enough in the city. And I, with your help, the leadership, and now Laura being on as the liaison there, I'm very happy, and I support this 100% because I think we get a great bang for our buck, not only for the citizens, but I've been able to meet a number of the businesses, and now the businesses seem to be on a roll where the businesses want to contribute more and more. We'll throw out Ben Franklin Bank, that's lying down by the creek. They do an outstanding job of contributing, and so I'll put it out there to any businesses. If you would like to throw some support, we would love to have it. So I just kudos for everybody that's been part of it.
Okay, and we thank you very much for your support on those and others. Next, for the additional proposed events, the new business advocate, Martha Corner, and I are working on a business and community showcase, which I'm sure you've heard about. That is hoping to happen end of April. We're looking at the 21st or the 28th, which is a Saturday, and we're hoping that will take place at Rolling Meadows High School in the Commons area. So we haven't firmed that up yet, but we will keep you updated as we know. And then returning events that were very successful last year will be Taste the Town, which will happen on March 3rd, and it's basically an indoor taste of Rolling Meadows. And then our 3 Friday Rock events will happen once again in June, July, and September. And then I won't rattle off, but the continuing events they're definitely listed, and they're kind of more of our traditional events that we've had great success with for a long time, or at least since the 60th. And with that, I just want to say thank you very much for your support. And does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from the council? Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I was just wondering, Lori, I think a lot of these things are really great events. I was a little bit concerned, though, that our budget has gone up. Our budget has gone up from $76,000 to $106,000 in 1 year. It's a pretty hefty thing. And I guess the other question I would ask in conjunction with that, Barry was very gracious and gave me a lot of information that I asked for. But the one thing I don't know is how much is it costing us in overtime and extra costs for employees that get paid over and above their normal 40-hour week. And I know you don't have all that answer right now, but I guess it'd be something I'd like to see down the line, because as much as I like these events, we do have a lot of other things we need to fund also. And I just want to make sure we're not getting too carried away either.
Yeah, in 2018, we can, because it is labor intensive, how to do that. And as I stated before, there are certain people that they flex their time. There are certain people that we have on regular time, or they move their time to make it as a regular. And then there is overtime. So in 2018, obviously when we sit down with the budget for 2019, we can have those discussions that show you how those points, especially showing you the transparency of what is actually going into some of these things. But again, it goes back into a lot of volunteers also. The other item from the 70 plus to the 100 plus, it also deals with the new business that was just mentioned before about that expo that we're putting up, that the Economic Development Committee also has a subcommittee working with that. But that new event does have a cost to it, because it is about $10,000 in it. But also increasing some of the other items. National Night Out is obviously a little more expensive, even as we continue fundraising for some of those. But when you look at the budget, it's specific to each of those pieces. When you look at the traditional ones, the tree lighting and the 4th of July and Memorial Day, those really have not changed. It's the overall community event line item between the Friday Rocks and try and get some additional bands and some of the other pieces. That's why that is actually increased. And we do watch that, and that is something that we will continue watching. And when we come to the 2019 budget, that's also part of the discussion that we have. The other item that I can say is actually with all the volunteers that we have that was mentioned before, we hope additional fundraising will get in, and we are starting to hit more businesses, and we really hope that some of those new businesses that have moved in will be participating, and we keep on bringing those discussions, and we're hoping continued with some of the additional conversations that business advocate Martha Corner is having, that people will see some of these benefits. And I will actually mention, when you go to the city website now, a lot of those videos that we've been producing and putting out is actually on ours. So we're hoping that will also drive more people to participate and also want to get their name onto something. And I would give the example, which has already been utilized for Wine Down by the Creek. Ben Franklin has been the sponsor for 2 years. But we also had this year that Holiday Inn actually sponsored one of the Friday Rocks. So we're hoping more of this continues out there, that some of this will be picked up in other ways too. So long answer, but I hope that suffices with
helps. The other question I would ask is, with the Community Events Foundation, I know we brought in 38 plus last year, and we spent 32. Are you allowed to tell us what the balance is for them? Do they settle? They have a seventh grant?
We actually, and again, I'm speaking on a Turner, but Finance Director Melissa Gallagher actually does do an update, and when they do have meetings, we do let them know what's actually sitting in that fund. On the top of my head, I do not remember what it is, but they do have a nice fund, but it's almost like it's revolving. It still has not. Originally, when it was set up, we were hoping $50,000 to $100,000 every year it was going to be generating, and you can see it's still limited to that, but it is picking up a lot of more things. So we'll continue fundraising, and we'll continue hopefully making that what it should have been.
Okay. A couple other questions. Just philosophically, why is it that our park district doesn't do more of these events as opposed to the city?
I'm not going to...
Well, most park districts do more of these events than most cities do in general, but it doesn't seem like our park district is doing that.
What I would say is that the park district we interact the best that we can with them, and that's actually when you look at the list, we do list some of their items that are coming up.
Yeah.
And Mr. Crumstock, if I can interject, we do, I want to call it partner with them on a few of the events. Ones that come to mind, Taste the Town is definitely, them and us as far as their facility. They, have to do the cleanup afterwards and janitorial things. Let's see, the parking lot party is definitely a partnered event. And we're definitely using their facility at senior luncheon. So, there are definite aspects that they help us out with for many of these events, the Fridays Rocks. So,
okay.
I don't like that.
I hear what you're saying.
So.
I guess the last comment I would make is I've expressed this to you guys privately over the years. I would really like us to consider moving the Christmas tree lighting to off the Thursday. People, especially couples where both of them work outside the home, it is really difficult for them to get off and get down to the tree lighting on a Thursday evening and get their kids ready and get them down there, especially if they have young kids. All of our neighboring communities seem to do it on a Saturday. Palatine had theirs last week. Elk Grove Village is having theirs this Saturday. I'd really like to see a Saturday event. Obviously, it's just an opinion.
Mm-hmm. So what we can do is 2018, we can have that discussion for 2019 or so, because I do know that certain communities do it the Friday after Thanksgiving, some do it the Saturday after. It all becomes, we can have that discussion. We've found traditionally, and I've been here since 99, it's that first Thursday in December that we've done it, that after Thanksgiving, and that was traditional what we've done, but in 2018 we can have that discussion about moving it or changing it.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, the only other comment I would make, having it on Thursdays with the concern has been brought up about overtime, is if we do anything on a weekend, we're paying overtime for bringing Park District and, for bringing staff in. If we do it during the weekday, they can set it up on an afternoon and be out there working, and we're not, with flex time, not paying overtime that we'd be paying on a weekend. So, any other comments? Mr. Diastis.
Thank you. As a business, and I know our businesses do help sponsor a lot, I think it's important that moving forward, we give them more recognition. I don't think we do nearly enough to recognize those businesses. I mean, you mentioned Ben Franklin twice, and that's a good thing. But in everything that we do, we've got a tree lighting and a spaghetti dinner. Who does the city make the spaghetti, or do we get that from someone?
We actually purchase that, and actually in the current news and views, we actually do thank the stadium for participating. But we are using news and views to actually name a lot of those sponsors that we utilized this year. But again, in this current issue, the stadium is thanked for because they actually participated with us twice this year. The food, the hamburgers that we had for the shortened Wine Down by the Creek.
No, Hometown.
Hometown Hoedown, excuse me. That was from the stadium, and actually for the last 2 years.
Not just them, but anybody
right.
that's participating. If we come up with any type of collateral material, those businesses need to be recognized, and they need to be recognized at the events as well, in front of all the people. It's just, I get, as a business, in my business, get lots of requests for donations and whatnot, and I'm pretty selective about what I donate to. I always donate within the community that I work within. And it's good. It's good. It makes me feel good as a business to know that what we're doing is being recognized by those folks who are going. So I think we can't do enough to say thank you to the businesses who donate whatever it is that they donate.
Right. And what we've been doing this year, we've been using a lot of signage to thank them. So when you came down to Wine Down, you saw Ben Franklin, but you also saw everybody else who did. And I think that when you look at National Night Out on the big stage in the back, we really list all those. So we have been doing more signage. It goes back into some of the other pieces that we hope, obviously the new business newsletter, we're hoping to also spotlight some of those people when they're out there. So we are trying to put the names out. It just goes back into each year as we get more sponsorships. And I think it also goes back as more people see some of the stuff, now they're interested.
Right. That's all. Thank you.
I would say that having been involved with many of these events, that I don't know how many have seen the new Wine Down by the Creek video. Is that out on our website yet? And so if you want to take a look at that, they did a very nice job of interviewing everybody who was a vendor at that event, and so they got an opportunity to do 20 or 30 seconds on that video of, this is my company, I'm glad here to be presenting it. We do, National Night Out. We also do a video that we've been doing for a number of years where we interview the various businesses, and I can tell you that I make it a personal, I guess. Every event we have, I try to be there, and we do a very good job of welcoming whoever they are and trying to do a photo session with them. So I agree with Mr. Diastis. We need to go forward and do even more, but we have been acknowledging them, and it's a going forward. So thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Badgers made it. Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
I don't want to go on and stay all night.